broadcasting from the Unshackled Studios in Melbourne. This is WilmsFront, brought to you by theunshackled.net. Now here's Tim Wilms.
Hello and welcome to tonight's show. The date is Monday, the 10th of February 2020. It is 7 p.m. here in Melbourne. We are live on the Tim Wilms YouTube and D Live channel. Please join in the live chats. You can support WilmsFront on D Live by sending through lemons. If you're watching on the Tim Wilms YouTube channel, please click the entropy link that I've put in the live chat and you can send through a super chat or ask myself or tonight's guest a question. And for the first time ever, WilmsFront is live on the Unshackled's main YouTube channel. That is because I know that I've had a lot of feedback from YouTube viewers of this show that they haven't been able to log in and participate in Entropy, and the main Unshackled YouTube channel is still monetized, so it allows our audience to go over or have a choice between either of the two channels. And if sending a super chat through YouTube by just pressing the dollar button is easier, then it's a win-win for all of us. Now, one of the breakout Australian alt media ventures of last year was Carnage House Productions, fronted by the Cameron brothers. Most of the major interviews on their channel last year were conducted by Dougal Cameron. He was one of my first guests on WilmsFront when the show began in September last year. I thought the two of us should catch up for a show, given that we'd been on somewhat of a hiatus over the summer period, and ask what his and Carnage House Productions plans are for 2020. Dougal, welcome.
Thanks, I just had to unmute the mic. I'm happy to be here. I missed you, Tim.
Yeah, I missed Carnage House Productions, and I'm especially, because I've asked you about it privately, I'm going to be missing the wrap, the weekly podcast with you and your brothers. You've told me you're discontinuing that.
Yes, we did have to put the wrap to bed, and it was a sad time to say goodbye. We really did enjoy doing the weekly news podcast, but we felt like we weren't getting as much bang for our buck in terms of the effort we put in compared to the product that we were putting out. And I think it would be fun to go back and do it at some stage in the future. But for now, we're going to focus on doing interviews and potentially the occasional catch up with the brothers. And I think we've talked about doing like a conspiracy theory series of like conspiracy theories that are proven true, which kind of informed our skepticism of the government, which maybe some other viewers might find useful as well. But at this point, we're focusing on interviews and not the wrap.
Well, I would say, because the wrap was podcast only, I'd suggest if you're going to do a series on conspiracy theories, don't put it on YouTube, put it just on podcast or somewhere else, because YouTube, they've deleted most of their conspiracy theory videos. I found over the past 4 years, they've deleted all the Pizzagate videos, really? Michelle Obama is a man, the Clinton body count, so yes. Yeah, you would be
surprising at all.
I mean,
but maybe my white privilege will get me over the line, and they won't delete me. Hopefully.
Yes, because it's serving all of us so well. I mean,
yeah, they have no idea, those guys, the Silicon Valley guys. I mean, I remember, I think Alex, my older brother, wrote an article about this after Epstein's suicide, quote unquote, about on the Twitter trending, it had Trump body count as trending allegedly, although if you actually looked at the numbers, the Clinton body count hashtag had like 5 times the activity, the Twitter activity, and yet in the trending section they put Trump body count. And these Silicon Valley moderators are probably the least impartial judges you could find anywhere.
I saw that Facebook today, they did a fact check on an American Enterprise Institute post about scientist who signed a UN petition against climate change and said that this is wrong. The American Enterprise Institute, yes, it's a conservative-leaning think tank, but they've been around and have done academic-style research for decades, but suddenly Facebook knows that, well, they make sure they put the fact check below that do not believe this information.
Yeah, it's terrible. I mean, one last one before I don't want to hold everybody up with these stories ragging on the moderators, but I read an article, one of those fact check articles recently, ones that pop up and they're all snazzy, like fact checking Donald Trump. And it was a claim I think he made on the election trail in 2017, which was that more British Muslims had gone to join ISIS than were serving in the British military. And the truth was that like 1,400 had gone over to join ISIS, had gone over to join various military groups, most of them towards ISIS. And there was about 600 who were in the British military. And the way they went around the fact check of Trump was saying that, well, not everybody went to ISIS, and some of them would have died while fighting. So while the British Muslims in the British military were active, there was probably not as many who were actively fighting for ISIS at the time. And then there's just like conclusion: Donald Trump wrong. And
I've noticed that's how a lot of their fact checks work. If they say something is wrong, it's because it's not entirely 100% accurate. Well, Trump or some other conservative person got some of the statistics slightly wrong. And that's how it works.
Yeah, and it's very selectively applied. That's a lot of the fake news as well, is the selective omissions. How the fact checks are never, rarely, it seems they're very one-sided and very slanted, and the same level of criticism doesn't get applied to progressive or social justice candidates or rhetoric, let's say.
Now, a few people are complaining in one of the live chats that the stream is buffering. We are streaming to 3 different platforms, DLive, YouTube Tim Wilms, and YouTube the Unshackled, so it is putting a strain on the internet. We'll keep going for now, and if it becomes too much, then we might have to kill one of them, probably the Unshackled one. So if you are wanting to send us a super chat through YouTube, do it through the Unshackled main channel. If you're on the Tim Wilms channel, then just go through the entropy link. Oh, was that what was that then? Is that someone breaking in because you're saying too much truth?
So I think it's a bit of rattling in the kitchen, but we'll be all right.
Okay. As long as you feel safe.
Oh, can I tell you, we have a very useless guard dog who I'm hoping will scare off anyone who comes in.
We have got a super chat from YouTube. Senator Slayer has sent through $2 said it's Timmy time. That's their affectionate nickname for this show.
Mate, I love Timmy time. My favourite time of the week.
Yeah, well, you can get it 3 nights a week now, Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays.
It's huge.
Well, since you're not doing the rap anymore, you're more than welcome to come on this show anytime you please, if you want to have a bit of a digest or wrap of the week in news, because that's what we're going to do for most of the show tonight with a sort of Carnage House bent, which is looking at all your favourite deep state dissidents.
Well, look, it sounds pretty good to me. I was thinking that before we came on, that maybe this could be a more regular thing now. I'm not getting my dose of weekly news anymore. And it means I don't have to do the editing and the uploading, and it's looked after by the big production facilities down in Melbourne. And so I think it could be a win-win for everyone.
Well, this is live, so there is some post-production where I have to edit it for podcast form and then upload it. And then I'm going to be starting, as soon as we knock knock off tonight, uploading the archive of WilmsFront. This is episode 43 onto Rational Rise TV. James Fox Higgins is finally, who's the director of Rational Rise TV, has finally set up an account for me. So in case YouTube does nuke it all, then the archive will be on Rational Rise TV in case I breach the community standards.
All right, well, hopefully we don't breach the community standards, but if we do, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
Well, we're talking about deep state dissidents, so community standards. That's more. It's more corporate standards that what we don't like you talking about.
Yeah, it's the corporates, it's the moderators.
Now, let's begin by talking about your girl in the presidential race, Tulsi Gabbard. She didn't do too well in Iowa, got 0.1%. No delegates to the Democratic National Convention, where they nominate their candidate for president. Or did she get more than 0.1%, given that this Shadow Inc. App failed, and Pete Buttigieg, who's pretty much the mainstream choice now, since that Biden, well, we all knew it for months, is going senile, so they've traded him in the DNC establishment for a younger model. He announced, "I've won," even though their results were 0-0-0.
Well, I know Dee is watching live, and I think she's getting a bit jealous when you called her my girl. But don't worry, Dee, I'll see you tonight. But Tulsi, my understanding is also that one of Buttigieg's staffers is married to I think the founder and potentially CEO of Acronym, who's the people that installed the app.
Yes.
And which is not incriminating, but it's shifty at the least. Such that he announced his results, his win, before the results were published. And then also his lead was over Sanders was reduced significantly to 0.1% by the end of it. And I think this time last year, it was also basically a dead heat between Sanders and Clinton, last election cycle. And so a lot of people think that, well, there's some rhetoric in that the DNC is just trying to edge out Bernie again, so not to angry the Bernie bros too much. But the Bernie bros feel like, I think, that it might be rigged. I also understand that Tulsi has purposely, at least her campaign is saying, they purposely put a focus on New Hampshire and ignored Iowa, and that she's currently polling about 2.7% in New Hampshire. But to get 0.1%, I mean, I like her. I feel like there should be some Americans that like her. 0.1% does seem small, but she has been left out of a few debates.
And the most recent one as well, they had the top 7, which is, of course, Joe Biden, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Pete Buttigieg, Tom Steyer, who basically has bought his way into the presidential race, albeit on a smaller scale than Bloomberg. He's saving up for Super Tuesday. And then, of course, there's Amy Klobuchar, the Minnesota senator. And then there's Andrew Yang, who's he's the only mainstream outsider candidate who's managed to most of the time get on the debate stage.
He's a normal guy. I quite like. I got much more time. Yang and Tulsi are my two favorite Dems, I have to say.
Yang, the thing that I like about him is that he understands the reason why the Democrats lost in 2016, why they lost the Rust Belt states and the digital disruption. I don't like his solutions, particularly the UBI. What does he call it? A freedom dividend. I think that's to quote a famous phrase, that's voodoo economics. But yes, he's still allowed on the debate stage to say this. But Tulsi Gabbard, she's been consistently excluded, and New Hampshire, well, 2.7%. That's not enough to, because a lot of the candidates they put a lot of attention into Iowa and New Hampshire, and they are over 90% white states as well. When the primaries move on to South Carolina and Nevada, and then Super Tuesday, then the dynamic completely changes. And Buttigieg, he's going to do well in New Hampshire, but then when it gets to, and it's been noted that he's not doing too well with the blacks. Some of it has to do with his sexuality, but it then goes to a Biden-Sanders contest in South Carolina onwards.
Last thing I would say about Tulsi is that I wouldn't rule her out to be a potential running mate for Sanders, but potentially Buttigieg, probably not Biden. So I wouldn't say her big political ambitions are necessarily over because she's polling poorly. I think she would have a lot of appeal as a running mate for someone like Bernie. But you're right. I mean, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in New Hampshire. It seems like it's a jostling match between Buttigieg and Sanders at this stage. I mean, I saw an ad released by Biden recently over the past few days, which is just a comparison of himself to Buttigieg and just belittling Buttigieg, which seems to me like the Biden campaign he kind of understands that they're losing and that there's this young no-name who's coming and beating them, which is kind of puts a smile on my face a little bit. But
they've been attacking his experience, the major Democratic candidates in the recent debate, given that he'd be one of the youngest presidents ever, at least for over 100 years, at just 38, or it'd be 39 when he's inaugurated, and he's only been a mayor of a small town in Indiana, South Bend. But as we've seen with the last two presidents, you don't need to have a big resume. Obviously, Trump was a celebrity billionaire, but never had any government experience. And Barack Obama was a first-term senator. Before that, he was a state senator. Before that, he was a community organizer. So and the last thing people want is senators being there 2 terms plus.
Sure, and I mean, I think it does hold back Biden, his like so-called experience, because if he had all these good ideas to bring good changes, surely you would have done it when you were vice president for 8 years. And I don't think just being anti-Trump is a strong enough platform to actually get elected. I think you actually have to offer the people a positive vision, and it's hard to do that when you actually had all the levers of power at your disposal for 8 years. And when you actually did use them, it seems like it was to enrich your own family in a whole lot of ways. And so I think it does. I mean, in a lot of ways, it does play towards those candidates who do have a lack of experience. Because I mean, Trump could say, I'm not beholden to special interest groups, or Pete Buttigieg could say, I haven't had necessarily all the power in front of me yet. And I mean, even you go back, like the American founding fathers, my understanding, we're all really young guys when they were preparing the major documents of independence and the Constitution. And I don't think necessarily that inexperience is, you prefer experience, but at the same time, it seems like when then there's a general consensus that there's a lot of shenanigans going on in Washington or in Canberra. It's like maybe experience is not what you're looking for.
Yeah, and that's why somebody said in the chat, Jalborg, that you may as well be discussing the plots of a soap opera. It's already been decided that Trump will get a second term. Well, never say never. There could be a plot twist, because
I think. Oh, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
I think it'll be really difficult to beat Trump. If without a recession or a major war. But what was it? There was the inversion of the yield curve like a year ago, which had quite a few economists worried that a recession might be coming. There's tensions with Iran right now, and you kind of don't know about North Korea. So there are those few kind of contingencies, but I think Trump is going to be really hard to beat. I have seen some whispers around different groups on Facebook that Trump is, well, a lot more whispers that Trump is controlled and a puppet and things like that. Maybe your audience is referring um, to such things.
Well, he does enough to please a lot of the dissident right to keep the faith that he is the one of the best presidents in recent memory, and they'll right to back him in 2016. But he also does enough to make sure the establishment don't turn on him. But, well, as we've seen, the deep state, they've had two attempts to knock him out with the Mueller report into Russian interference, and then, of course, the impeachment, which Trump was acquitted based on the phone call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky, which apparently it was a coded call for a quid pro quo that he would give the military aid in exchange for an investigation into Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, when he sat on the board of a oil and gas company doing business near Burisma. And there was the whistleblower in the CIA. Let's just call him Erica Cartman. But because there's no law against saying his name, but there is it's a cyber crime, and as we know, the social media giants are above the law.
Well, it's just the lack of self-awareness from the Democrats. Sometimes I find is astounding that they're going through an impeachment process to impeach the president for a crime they know that one of their major presidential nominee candidates has done. Right? And that the impeachment process was actually about investigating Joe Biden, who did the thing which they're trying to impeach him for. And he not only is one of their impeachment candidates, but was their vice president for 8 years. And they don't give a flying F about the actual crime. They just hate the guy. And it seems like what a lot of people are saying is they've looked at the poll numbers that Trump is polling too high to be beaten in 2020, and they're trying to find, a sneaky exit. And I mean, Trump polled, I think, in a Gallup presidential approval poll this week at 49%, which is very difficult to beat. And I've got a gut feeling it will go up during an election cycle when Trump is actually able to advertise all the things he's done in his 3 years and how busy he has been. And when the Democrat nominee is finally elected, then they will face, I think, incredible scrutiny, and their numbers will probably go down. So I would expect Trump to do even better than he did in 2016, and I think his approval ratings will probably only go up.
Of course, in the Democrat primaries, the wild card is Bloomberg with his billions, but there's still a lot of people speculating that Hillary Clinton, she might make a last-minute run. I know that going back to our girl Tulsi Gabbard, she's slapped Hillary Clinton with a $50 million law pantsuit over their podcast appearance where, without mentioning her name, said, I think the Russians have got their eye on somebody in the Democratic primary, grooming her to be a third-party candidate. And Tulsi Gabbard, she's already suing Google for not running her ads when she was trending after one of the first debates. A lot of people have been saying that, Tulsi Gabbard, she might be suicided, but she's a military combat veteran, and if anyone can knows if someone's sneaking up behind to put 2 bullets in the back of their head, it's her.
Well, look, I'm hoping and praying she makes it through and takes $50 million out of the Clinton Foundation bank account is what I would love to see. Bloomberg, oh sorry, but one point on Bloomberg. Let's just not forget that ad he released saying, "I love big gay ice cream." That was just the worst thing of all time. And I don't know if, go look it up. Anyone in the audience who hasn't seen it, look up Bloomberg big gay ice cream, and it's probably the worst thing you'll ever watch, and it'll give you nightmares tonight. But, sorry, what are you going to say?
I was going to say, I'm surprised that he said he loved ice cream, given how much of a nanny status health nut he is, because wouldn't that have too much fat in it? As Mayor of New York, he had his, trans fats ban, and also his soda ban on too many ounces. So, well, goodbye to a
Really?
large one of, well, this is sugar-free, so it would get around it, but if you wanted, 7-Eleven Super Slurpee or one of those big ones at the cinemas, you couldn't get it.
What a he sucks. He's like I. There are times when you want to just go and get a big Slurpee and go and watch a movie and be a bit of an unhealthy guy for the afternoon, and that's fine. You should be allowed to do it. The government shouldn't be involved in that, and that's your decision. I think Tulsi has mine. I read a few articles today about the lawsuit in particular, and some legal scholars are saying that well, there's on both sides of the fence. So there are those people who think Tulsi should win, and those people who think Tulsi won't win. But it seems like it could go either way. Now, the only caveat to that is that these powerful people who are just in that highest echelon of society, Clinton among them, Epstein among them, have a way of getting off these charges and have a significant influence over legal proceedings, and it seems even in their own cases, like in the Clinton email scandal, Benghazi, etc. And I wouldn't be surprised if somehow she gets off scot-free. But at the same time, Trump's appointed heaps of judges. I don't know if one of them will end up being the judge in this case, but I hope so. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it goes. I'm hoping she makes Clinton a lot poorer.
Yes, well, she is in the best position to take on somebody of that stature. Going back to Bloomberg, to make a neat segue here, when he first announced his presidential run on Twitter, a photo circulated of him with Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's madame, procurer, pimp, whatever you want to call her. She recruited the girls for this child sex trafficking ring, a daughter of a British media mogul Robert Maxwell, who, after his empire was coming undone in 1991, mysteriously fell off his yacht in the Canary Islands, and it was ruled an accident, suicide, nothing to see here. So I'm not sure if you've looked into the Maxwell family, but I'd always like to mention that fact. But Ghislaine Maxwell, she was a New York socialite and got around, and she was photographed with Michael Bloomberg, and she's a lot taller than Michael Bloomberg. Trump made a tweet joke that Bloomberg he'd need a stool for the debates. Right. Yeah, and was seen and fact checked it.
Yeah, well, Tom, I think in this Super Bowl halftime report, Trump was talking about Bloomberg wanting a box.
Little Mike, yeah.
Yeah, Mini Mike, he calls him. No, I haven't looked into the Maxwell family, and maybe that's a rabbit hole I'll eventually go down. But, you know, it doesn't surprise me. And
here's the photo here. I heard Michael Bloomberg might enter the presidential race. Here he is pictured with Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend, handler, child procurer. Be a shame if it went viral. Yeah, it's a shame that I managed to get a hold of it in this short time.
Well, one side note I want to add, which I just cannot work my head around, is what's the deal with Prince Andrew? How come he's not really getting in trouble? Surely if I was Donald Trump or something, if I was Donald Trump, I'd be saying to England, hey, look, I need you to do X, Y, and Z for me, or else I'm going to tweet out that Prince Andrew needs to be investigated. I think there would probably be a lot of leverage with that, right?
But the thing is, though, do you know who one of Donald Trump's counsels were in his impeachment trial?
Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz, who defended both Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein, and has called Virginia Roberts a liar who he's going to sue.
Yeah, well, I have looked into that a little bit. That also, what's the other guy's name? Ken Starr, I think, who are both were representing Epstein in 2007 and 2008 when he got that very generous plea deal from, what is it, soliciting and trafficking underage girls, and he only got 13 months house arrest, where he could go to his office like 6 days a week for 12 hours, and his office was like the best office of all time, probably. What do you make of that? It seems like the choice to represent him, it seems like they did a good job in the impeachment trial. Do you think they're a bad influence on Trump, though, and that they make him not prosecute Prince Andrew or go after the kind of pedophile ring, as it gets called?
Oh, definitely. I mean, the fact that he has managed to get Epstein that plea deal and basically make the scandal disappear for 11 years afterwards. But if you're acting in purely self-interest, you'd want someone like Dershowitz. If he can get somebody like Jeffrey Epstein off, and he was part of the OJ All-Star team as well, yeah, you'd want him on your team. And I'm surprised that someone of Dershowitz's clientele, he's on now Fox News all the time. He's not really a Democrat or a Republican. He's more just sort of he calls himself a civil rights lawyer. Obviously, he's very pro-Zionist, supports Israel in the Israeli-Arab conflict. There's not too much else to him. He was a Harvard law professor for many years. He's nearly 80.
Well, he's obviously a very smart guy. The question is, what's he fighting for? Who knows? There's always the option as well that maybe Trump is, using that as leverage on Dershowitz. But sometimes it's hard to understand some of the moves Trump makes, and sometimes after the fact it might become more clear. But at least he's off the impeachment. He didn't get convicted, and that he's enjoying a nice victory lap and bump in the polls this week.
The negative Nancy, the salty speaker, she wasn't too pleased, tearing the speech up, and which was later revealed had pre-tears in it because she's 79 years old. She obviously doesn't have the strength in her old hands to tear through raw paper.
Did you see Trump shared an edit of he'd insert the clips of him talking about the inspirational stories from the State of the Union address, and then insert Pelosi ripping it each time.
Yeah.
And then Pelosi's campaign team has come out and started criticizing Facebook and I think a few other platforms, Twitter, for not deleting the footage as like deliberately misleading and fake news, which the irony is not lost on here on the WilmsFront or the Carnage House.
I mean, when we see something like that, we know that it's edited, but the idea of it is she ripped the whole speech up. And so by doing that, she has said that all of it is not worth the paper it's written on. So screw that 100-year-old war and space veteran, those young and struggling families. That's what it's meant to communicate. And it was... like tearing up something in public is meant to be a very dramatic act. You don't sort of do it lightly. To do that with the president of State of the Union, and I know people say, "Oh, how can you call it childish given how Trump behaves?" But
what in the speech, didn't she like? I mean, I watched a lot of the speech. There's a lot of great economic numbers, some inspirational stories. I mean, it was a fun speech for everybody, really.
I said bad things about socialism, and also gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Rush Limbaugh. Melania put it on, and Russia's got its advanced. Can't remember what sort of cancer it is, but
I think might have been lung cancer.
Yeah, but when it's advanced, you sort of his chances, you don't want to sort of be doom and gloom, but it's very serious.
Yeah.
And you can sort of see already how sort of frail he looks. Like he's lost a lot of weight. If you look at old photos of him, he's this big fat guy. And yeah, so it's already having, but he's going to be like Alan Jones, his Australian equivalent. He's a cancer survivor, and Alan Jones, he made sure he turned up to work all the time that he could.
He's a trooper. He's a trooper. But yeah, there's a lot of good news stories. A lot of good news stories in the State of the Union. And I mean, if she tore up the speech of of Trump's speech the day after the acquittal when he just ripped the Democrats, like, I get that, but to rip up the State of the Union, which had so many good news stories in it, seems a bit much.
Yeah, very, and of course it's a gift to Trump because in the ads for the presidential election, because Trump was outlining his not just they're not his achievements, they're America's achievements. And so they can just run Trump's record and just play Pelosi tearing them all up. Like, this is what the Democrats think of it all, so don't put them in. It's the ads write themselves.
Well, can I tell you, I think Trump is just going to have so much material to run on. Like, with the economic success aside, like, how much more stable North Korea is than it was under Obama.
I don't think much changed. I mean, North Korea, they promised to give Trump a Christmas present with a new missile test, but even though it probably didn't happen due to their own incompetence.
Right. Well, that might be a discussion point. But I mean, even you had a look at his Super Bowl ad after the what's it called? The First Step Act, the prison justice reform, criminal justice reform.
Yeah.
You can have a look at his like border policy. You can have a look at how he's restructuring the international trade agreements. The what is it? USMCA?
Yeah, it almost sounds like YMCA. The USMCA.
Yeah. But I think he's gonna have a lot to run on, and he has been busy. He's got a lot of work to do still. Like, I think a lot of people are still very concerned about the debt. I think a lot of people are concerned about the healthcare system. But I think he's done enough to not lose any votes from 2016 and probably win some, in my opinion.
Of course, what a lot of people talk about, and this is what I'm not. Since we last spoke, Nick Fuentes and his Groper Army and the America First movement have burst onto the scene. They say that Trump might win the next election, but he still hasn't built much of the border wall. There's both still vast amounts of legal and illegal immigration, which is demographic change is still happening. State of Virginia is now flipped blue permanently. They're trying to bring in the gun confiscation laws, and if Texas and Florida flip blue, then it's going to be very hard for the Republicans to win an electoral college victory. The reason why Trump was able to win it in 2016 because he flipped the white Rust Belt states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, which are, of course, up north near the Canadian border.
Well, I would love to see what they're talking about. I mean, I'm not a US election expert, and I think, what would I say? I'm open to that idea. I'm open to the idea that Trump's going to need to work harder to win the next election, but I think he has so much to run on. And I think he has proof. And I think that's just such a rarity for politicians to have actually done something. I also think all of his rhetoric about fake news, about the deep state, has all been proven true after the fact, after he got elected. And I think he's in a really strong position after the impeachment acquittal.
Well, Trump, a few times during his presidency, he's brought us to the brink of what everyone thought would be World War III, and then it's just fizzled right out, and we saw at the beginning of the year with the US-Iran tension after their General Soleimani was assassinated in a drone strike in Iraq, and everyone was wondering how Iran would retaliate. They had a sort of mediocre response where they launched missiles which didn't really damage much, and then Trump basically said, yeah, I think we've sort of sent a message, and their response was pretty lame, so yeah, that's it. And that was the end of it.
I was worried for an afternoon. I remember I was sitting in class and I saw the kind of live updates. I was following Fox and CNN and a few other places. It was because only like a day or two before, Trump had tweeted out that if Iran retaliates with anything, we're going to immediately hit 52 sites, like quickly, with no hesitation, to represent like the 52 hostages, I think it was, that the Iranians captured a few, I don't know how long ago. And when they hit, I was like, there's no way Trump can play this off or not retaliate. It's either he backs down or the Iranians back down, but Trump seems to have played it off, and it's just one of those water off a duck's back moments where he just keeps marching forward and nobody really takes notice of it after it's out of the news cycle.
And it was the same when the North Korean tensions were at their height. Trump talked about the US will rain down fire and fury like the world has never seen, and all the liberal progressives were like, Trump's going to get us all killed.
Yeah. Well, can I tell you, I have serious doubts about that man sometimes, but often in the next few days, I like him again.
Yeah, it's like I said, he brings us to, and it's probably part of as his book, famous book, put out there, The Art of the Deal. It's about you put forward a extreme proposal situation, and so that it forces your enemies, adversaries to come down to a position which you're actually comfortable with. And it's he obviously, as president, he's playing this out in a much more high stakes manner, but it's working. I mean, it's giving a few people heart attacks, but yeah, it is working.
Yeah, mate, it's a high level game theory, which nobody else seems to be prepared to play. It does give me a heart attack occasionally. I've had a couple. I mean, when we attacked the Syrian air base as well, that was another one. Like, are we really doing this again? North Korea, I was a bit more confident about, just because I felt like it would be really just so dumb for North Korea to do anything. But you know, here we are, and I think you have to judge on the results in some sense, right?
Yeah, but he still has made many foreign policy blunders. Obviously, the war in Yemen is still going, which the US is fighting on behalf of Saudi Arabia, which is disgusting. And there's still actually more troops in the Middle East under his presidency than there were under Barack Obama. And of course, the increase in the military budget, though to his credit, he hasn't started any new wars. They're just continuing wars under W. Bush and Obama.
Well, did you see the interview where Trump was bragging about, he's like, we've got the troops there and we've secured the oil? I don't think previous presidents were openly saying that they've secured the oil, although that might have been what they were doing. But Trump seems to be very proud that he's taking other countries' oil, which I didn't really appreciate. I think it was an interview with Fox, maybe with Laura Ingraham, I think.
Yeah. They're more open now, not just Trump, but deep state neocons, that yes, it's about the oil. Like, we are exchanging blood for oil. That's what it's always been about. But during the Afghanistan Iraq war years under George W. Bush, it's like, no, it's about liberating countries. It's not about oil at all.
Yeah. Although the other relevant point is that now that Trump has made US, energy independent, and I think an overall exporter of energy now, he said as well in that interview that changed our strategic interests in the Middle East now that US is energy independent. So that might actually provide the framework for US to come out in the future. That's what I hope for, but you never know.
Now, obviously, after World War III was averted, another global crisis has arisen, and that's the coronavirus, which broke out in the central Chinese city of Wuhan in December last year. Now, I've just got the stats out in front of me. There are now over 40,000 confirmed cases worldwide and over 900 deaths. Most of those are in mainland China. Obviously, Australia now has a travel ban from Chinese nationals coming from mainland China, and a lot of people don't trust the information that's coming out of the Chinese government about the virus, since it is a communist dictatorship. But what do you make of it? And of course, you have spent much time in China studying on homestay, so I'll let you share your analysis of it.
Sure. I mean, so I lived for a year in Shanghai, a year in Nanjing. Both of those cities are quite close to Wuhan. I went to Wuhan once, and Wuhan is it's a smaller city, but it's I went with the dad of my homestay family. He went to get his car serviced there, and my understanding is it's almost like the Detroit of China, where there's a lot of car manufacturing that gets done there. But to give you an idea of what China's like at the moment, so when I lived in the foreign students' dormitories as well, and some of my friends are still there. They didn't go home before all the flights were cut off, before they weren't allowed to go home anymore. And so they're stuck in the dormitories. And so everybody, even Chinese citizens, not even just in Wuhan, in Shanghai, in Beijing, in every major city, are staying at home. They do not go outside. There are videos that pop up on Chinese social media of people being so bored that they literally drop a fishing line into their fish bowl, and that's how they're entertaining themselves to pass the hours. And it's been weeks. It's been weeks like that. And so my friends in the dormitory have the dormitory matron go and buy all of their groceries, and because there's nothing to do, they've all taken up smoking, and so they send photos of the cigarette packet they want to these 60-year-old ladies who then go out and buy them the cigarettes and bring it back. They're just not allowed to leave. People don't leave their homes. And I had one Australian friend who was there until recently. I think he got on a flight recently, but I was having a talk to him, and he said, yeah, I've got to choose between staying up here for an unknown period of time until flights are back on and we're all good, or I can take the flight back to Australia and go and spend 2 weeks in Christmas Island with people who might have the coronavirus. And it's a tough situation for everybody involved. The stats, as far as I'm aware, the confirmed cases are people who've been admitted to hospital, but there are, of course, probably a fair amount of people who were either not admitted to hospital or didn't go to hospital. And there's a chance that the Chinese government is just downplaying those numbers in general. But the Chinese nation, Chinese government would absolutely be feeling the pain of this right now. I think it costs their economy $250 billion a week just because nobody's outside, nobody's going to the shops, nobody's going to work. It's a crazy situation, and nobody knows how long it's going to go on for. Chinese universities are supposed to start in a week or two, but they've been postponed indefinitely. So Chinese students won't go to university until they get a notice from the government that it resumes. The international students are told to stay in their own countries, don't come back. It's crazy.
Yeah. Do you think all these precautions are necessary?
Look, I'm not a medical expert, but it seems like probably yes. I think that banning flights from China is probably a good idea right now. I mean, if you look at the precautions that China is actually taking on its own citizens, what Australia is doing is hardly anything compared to it. So relatively, we're not actually doing that much. You have some people who wear face masks around. We have offshore processing. I think that some people have taught like hype up the kind of racism or people looking at you funny on the train if you're Chinese, if you wear a face mark. I think that's a lot of that is just noise. I think the fact that we don't have like a cure for it or something, it leads to the conspiracy theory that maybe it's a mass vaccine situation, but I can't say that or promote that. I've just heard that. What do you think?
Oh, if there have been the usual brigade claiming that the coronavirus that's leading to a spread of racism, and there was actually a socialist rally in Melbourne calling for an end to the racist Chinese travel ban, and we had the former race discrimination Commissioner Tim Supamasani talking about the flights out of Wuhan of Australian nationals to Christmas Island, saying, "Oh, we wouldn't treat white Australians like this." He sees bigots everywhere, and also examples of racism have just been jokes that some businesses have dared to make. There was one. There was one, I think it was like a coffee place in Sydney City that said the coronavirus won't last long because it's made in China. And then there was a Harvey Norman on the weekend. Our mattresses don't have the coronavirus because they're made in Australia, and everyone on Twitter's outraged. But it's just a old-fashioned like Aussie racially charged joke. I'm old enough to remember all of the wog jokes in the 90s. I had Marcus Fu on my last show on Wednesday. He just spent time in Malaysia, and during the show he let out a few coughs, and I was like, "Oh, you haven't got the coronavirus, have you?" Or if when you cough in public, are people being very racist to you?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big defender of jokes. I always defend the jokes, even the ones that don't land or are mean. We shouldn't be policing the jokes. I think, I mean, even in our first interview, I think you spent maybe the first 15 minutes talking about my ginger hair, but it's like, who cares, man? It's usually funny, and if it's not, you're allowed to have a crack anyway. And we're obviously, a lot of people in the world look a bit different, and my feeling is, the way you get over that is not by like looking around. Oh, I didn't notice that. I thought we actually had the same skin color. Oh, you know, I didn't. It's actually no. Like, oh, that's like, you can make jokes about it. You can make jokes that I'm white or you're black. I mean, white people jokes are like probably the most popular racial jokes there are. Like white girl jokes, or like, you know, when someone jumps over the fence at the zoo, like, of course it's a white person that does that. I mean, it's how I think we actually cross bridges when we do that.
Also, the other argument, oh, it's a deadly virus, you shouldn't make jokes about that. But that's how people get through tense times, difficult times, by humor. I mean, there's tons of jokes about war and famine. I mean, like, we all make jokes about people starving during the communist famines. That it's the Communist Manifesto is a diet book that actually works, but of course we still, at the same time, it's horrible that ideology killed 100 million people. But the humor is also a way of communicating something historical as well.
Sure. Well, sometimes it's only the jester in the court that can tell the truth. I mean, I think there was I want to say that Czechoslovakia under the Soviet Union, there was a guy, I think he was a former president. This is me saying one of my alternative facts, which doesn't have a source or any particular names in it. But because there was this narrative of working class oppressor, bourgeoisie, the bourgeoisie doing the oppressing and the working class being oppressed. And that was the official narrative, and you couldn't go against that. Otherwise, you were, economically subverting the state, kind of like straight to the gulag. But there was that official language, but then there was also the unofficial language of the people, which is how the people talked. But because they couldn't go against that narrative, in serious conversations, there was a second underneath language of jokes, of sarcasm, of humor, which did contradict it, but because it was through humor, the words, when you string them together in a sentence and you said them out loud, couldn't be used to prosecute you in a court, right? I remember a little while ago, a few months ago, I think there was a headline that Kim Jong-un banned sarcasm in the North Korean court, and anyone being sarcastic was, able to be punished. And that's because jokes are powerful. They bring people together, and they often that you tell the truth in jokes, and you can come over differences easily through jokes.
Yes, it's a reason why mainstream comedy is dying, because they've forgotten, or jokes are not politically correct these days. Your brother Alexander did an op-ed about Dave Chappelle's Netflix special, which was it wasn't just funny, but it was actually good social commentary. He's always told racially charged jokes, and this is a bit of a tangent here, but the sort of gist that I got from that Sticks and Stones was that he was basically saying, like, oh, whites with, you're all losing your jobs on the opioid epidemic, hey, you're just going through the same things that black people used to do.
Yeah, well, Dave's made his living off racial jokes, and some of what he says, agree with or disagree with or whatever, but he should always be allowed to tell the jokes. And oftentimes, even when I don't agree with the actual points he's making, I'm laughing at the jokes because they're delivered well. But as Dave Chappelle says, if you want to make a living in comedy these days, you can't upset the alphabet people, and that's where we find ourselves.
As the late Joan Rivers said as a disclaimer in one of her comedy shows, if any various groups are offended by tonight's show, then lighten the fuck up. These are just jokes, you assholes.
Yes. Well, that's it, right? I mean, you poke fun at people, and that's like Australian culture, man. Like, I hate the censorship. I think jokes are good. I mean, can you imagine, I think when, the Anzacs are running like up Gallipoli or down Gallipoli back onto the boats, I think there's probably a few jokes being made. I think that would probably be a way that they got through it. I mean, there's a lot of larrikinism I know going on in Egypt, but it's what we do, man.
Now, we might go back to Australia, what's been happening here at the beginning of the year. Just a reminder, if you're watching us on the Tim Wilms channel, please join us over on Entropy to send through a super chat, or you can ask myself and Dougal a question. And if you're on the main Unshackled channel, you can simply press the dollar button to send through a super chat there directly. And if you're on D Live, you can send through a lemon to support the show. Now, one of your featured interviews on Carnage House last year, I was going to ask you this before, but I'll ask you now. Obviously, you conduct most of the interviews. You're definitely not hogging the limelight. There's no brotherly brawls about Dougal's hogging it. I want my time to shine.
No, well, I mean, Alex has always been busy. Like he does university, a job. He's got for the past few years, he had a pretty serious relationship as well. Me, I don't have many commitments, so I was always ready to go and do it, get the cameras, and we're off. He's recorded one recently, which he's editing up now. He did. A few of our friends have started a business, different businesses. One's making a wine business, and one's making chili sauce and dips. And so they're editing a video right now of them getting drunk and trying out different chili sauces and dips and advertising the companies. So that's something to look forward to. But I tend to do most of them.
As one of the big ones you landed last year was Bettina Arndt, she's had a 50-year career. Started off as a sex therapist in the 70s, teaching prudish Australia at the time about sex, especially women, how to get pleasure in relationships. But now she's more known for her men's rights advocacy, and she's made herself the prime enemy of the feminist movement. And I think to both of our pleasant surprise, she was made a member of the Order of Australia on Australia Day. So she's now Bettina Arndt AM, and this outraged the feminists because they, in their view, she belittles sexual assault survivors. And of course, there's the interview she did last year with a teacher who was convicted and sent to jail for having a relationship with one of his high school students, Nicholas Bester. And I just watched just before we started the show, one of her latest vlog update, and she's now republished that interview on her website because it got taken off YouTube because Nicholas named the girl who he had the relationship with, which was illegal at the time, because we've only seen snippets of the interview on 60 Minutes, ABC, and so I haven't had a chance to yet actually sit down and watch the whole thing rather than just the snippets to judge whether Bettina did make a grave error of judgment in interviewing him and the way that she presented it, or as she proved in a lot of her latest vlog, the new Matilda articles trying to smear her. They've taken bits of her columns over the years and just put it there to paint her in the worst possible light, whether it's another case of that. But Bettina's been very on the offensive, defending herself. If it was the Victorian Attorney General Jill Hennessy wrote to the Governor General asking for her honour to be revoked.
Well, I think it's a nice boost to her career. I think she deserves the publicity. She's been working hard, and I think she's got a lot of good, interesting, factual contributions to make to the kind of social commentary of gender politics, which gets made. I also had a look at an article which she wrote about the interview you're referring to. It's always going to be a very difficult optics when you are going into bat for a sex offender. And the reason why she was going into bat, it was because this guy went to prison, came out of prison, and kept getting harassed by people. Like he couldn't, people were camping at his house, he couldn't go for a job, etc. And there's one argument, a strong argument, which is, we have no sympathy for that guy and kind of he gets what's coming to him. But the other side of the argument is, well, we live in a society where you do get second chances after you do your time. That type of treatment doesn't happen to someone who was like murdered somebody else, but it seems like this kind of hatred is reserved for sex offenders, and I'm kind of leaving the jury out on that one. I don't mind the interview at all, but Tina said it was a mistake for her to have interviewed the guy with such a relaxed tone, which is probably fair, and she should probably going into that understand that the optics are going to be bad, and she needs to be, maybe less friendly. But I think particularly when you have Pauline Hanson talking about domestic violence, Pauline Hanson has a lot, and family courts. Bettina Arndt has a lot of good contributions to make. I mean, Joel Jamal, another friend of the Unshackled and of Carnage House, and I think Samrat as well, had organised an event at Macquarie University where Bettina Arndt gave a lecture, and I was sitting there were protesters outside, and we got to the end of the talk, and the guy next to me said, that talk was just so factual, it was almost dull. I mean, there's not any hate coming out of Bettina. There's not any vitriol. There's not any really belittling of victims of sexual assault. It seems to me, just media talking points, as she's one of the key players in Australia who is taking down some feminist narratives that surround gender politics.
Well, her latest campaign is to take down, as she calls them, the kangaroo courts at universities where they adjudicate sexual assault claims, which it's not a legal court by any stretch of the imagination. It doesn't have the presumption of innocence, the beyond reasonable doubt. But if a university board or court finds that you sexually assaulted somebody, then that's still a blemish on your life record. And there was a court ruling in Supreme Court of Queensland against them, and so that is one of her latest crusades.
Yeah, well, it's obviously a very strange, at least in the very least, situation where the universities are judging guilt or innocence of the students. And the reason why it goes to the universities is because there aren't enough convictions through the legal system in the status quo. And the reason for that is, rapes, my understanding is, in general, have quite a low conviction rate, basically because it turns out to be like a he said, she said argument. In like in a murder case, for instance, right, you have a dead body, you have a murder weapon, or if in a robbery, you have the wedding ring, which is not there anymore, which the robber has. In a rape, it can be very difficult to prove the lack of consent. And so I can understand a range of frustrations from people who say like, well, why do we have to go through all the trauma of like prosecuting this guy who did this to me, and then just not have it convicted because he denied it and said it was consensual. But at the same time, I think the foundation of our legal system is like innocent until proven guilty, and I don't think you can just remove that because there is a terrible crime which is hard to convict someone of. And at the same time, you can see that these crimes like rape or domestic violence, which have this special attention paid to it, can also get leveraged a lot. And so you see like these claims against Donald Trump, like in his election campaign, you see them leveraged against a lot of celebrities.
Brett Kavanaugh, remember that?
The Kavanaugh debacle. I mean, even in the and it's all. Well, I guess what I'm saying is, I don't think the universities should be involved in it because you're still going to like kick that kid out of university. You're going to make his life a lot harder, and if you just don't have the evidence for it, I'm not sufficiently convinced that you can just replace the legal principles which the whole other legal system uses to operate.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I saw that one of your first interviews for 2020 was about the Australian bushfires. You interviewed a young ADF personnel about it.
Yeah, so Alexis Bush was on the Rural Fire Service. He's a buddy of mine. He actually went on Armenian news. He's Armenian heritage, and so he went on Armenian news and talked about the bushfires. We talked a lot about why the bushfires were there. We talked a bit about the politics around it. One of the things I found really interesting was people often talk, like you see we'd call it the right media. The media of the right talks about it as like green policy. I had no idea what green policy was. One of the interesting things is like, he was explaining to me this story of a guy, all the properties on his street, except his, burnt down, but he built a fire break. And what a fire break is you dig up like a strip of land in front of your house, and it just creates like a barrier of earth. So there's like no plants that can catch on fire there or whatever. It's just a barrier of earth. But obviously the problem is you have to dig up plants and knock down trees and stuff. And so you're supposed to get like council permission to do that.
Yeah, this is the thing.
And then you're supposed to have like some council person come and tell you like which trees you're allowed to cut down and which trees you can't cut down. And it costs you a whole lot of money. Then you call in someone to come and do it. And often the council only gives you permission for like a small section. And this guy just said, nah, I'm not doing that, and just dug it all up himself. And he saved his property, but every other property on his street burnt down. But that guy is still waiting for a fine. And that's the type of green policy, as far as I understand it, which is really hurting people being able to like defend their homes or be able to do hazard reductions in national parks or whatever the case may be.
And Scott Morrison, he's announced a royal commission into the bushfires, and he hasn't yielded to the Twitter mob who have said this is all to do with climate change. You need to declare a climate emergency, need to decarbonize the economy. I think the last time we spoke, not even Greta was she was around, but she didn't make a "How dare you" speech. Yeah. But yes, obviously the climate strikes, a lot of them happened towards the end of the year and Rebellion Week. So there is huge pressure from social media and mainstream media for Scott Morrison to take greater action, whatever it is. But he said, no, I want this Royal Commission to look at fuel loads and hazard reduction. Obviously, he can't direct the states what to do, but he certainly wants to, as these Royal Commissions, basically their function is just to lay the dirty laundry about how things happened, whether it's banks or aged care or other things.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to see what happens with the Royal Commission. I'd love to see what happened in the national parks. But I mean, bushfires on one hand are an Australian phenomenon, and they're going to happen every year. And some years are going to be bigger than others. And this year was a particularly bad year. Obviously, it didn't help that we had Australia's worst drought in like 100 years for the preceding 7 years before this. And it also didn't help that there was a range of hazard reductions which weren't done in the lead up. In regards to climate change, I've always had a really tough time with this issue. And anytime I speak on it publicly, I always say I really don't know the answer, because there are people who I like and trust who are like very committed to kind of climate change action or climate change, what change or whatever. Climate change. And there are some people who I like who think the whole thing's a scam made to get, for government to take more power. And it's obviously true that the climate change movement has been infiltrated ideologically by some very serious Marxists in like Extinction Rebellion. It's obviously true that there's been some data manipulation by, bureaus of meteorology. The argument that comes from the climate change deniers, I also find is difficult though, because some have denied that it was heating up. Some have denied that humans are contributing. Some have accepted that humans are contributing, but we shouldn't shut down the coal industry. And seems like there's a range of arguments from people who get grouped together as climate denialists. And so it's hard for me to see a coherent case coming out of the denialists camp as well. So I always really don't know where to stand on this, and I'm hoping at some point to do my own research on it, but at this point I really don't know at all.
Well, even there are mainstream climate change activists or scientists who they say we do need to do something to reduce the warming of the world, but they don't go as far as, was it Greta, AOC, Extinction Rebellion, that the world's going to end, humanity will be extinct in 10, 12 years.
Yeah, well, I'm fully open to that. But the question is, do you shut down coal-fired power? Do you say we're not going to use natural gas anymore? Is renewable technology there? There's a lot of people that say it is, a lot of people that say it's not. Those are questions which should have an answer.
Well, there's nuclear power, and I'm glad that the new resources minister, Keith Pitt, he's pro-nuclear, and that might be on the agenda. Coal seam gas, I'm not sure where you sit on it. It is low emissions, and so is natural gas as well.
Nuclear seems very intuitive, considering that I think Australia has a lot of the world's is it uranium? We export uranium, I think.
Yeah.
And it's very strange that we don't use it here in Australia for like so-called environmental reasons, but we're very happy to export it to other countries to use it. And that's one of the things I find so strange about Australia's why. Well, some people say that the renewables plans and emissions targets and stuff, which have driven up electricity prices in Australia. Like we're still exporting coal to China, who's going to still burn that coal. Just they're not going to put all of those price regulations on coal. So if you're worried about the warming of the atmosphere, all you're doing is driving up the electricity prices. So Australians don't burn your coal, but Chinese burn Australian coal for cheaper than we can. I mean, I could sit in my Chinese dormitory room with the air conditioning on 24/7 and hardly have to pay anything. I mean, Australians, on the other hand, where burning coal in the country where it was dug up, have to pay insane amounts for it.
And we've also got, we're turning into a third world energy supplier, and also a third world internet as well. And of course, the you mentioned the drought. It's more of a man-made drought due to the mismanagement of the Murray-Darling basin. So we've done well in shooting ourselves in the foot with regard to having the essential utilities of the modern world. You'd actually probably have a higher standard of living if you went to somewhere like Thailand or the Philippines to live and work.
Oh, can I guarantee you, you would. Thailand's a lot of fun, I hear. You can get a really nice apartment, people to come and clean your house, eat the best food, live on the beach. I mean, I hear it's the life.
Yeah, and you can get super fast internet, cheap electricity.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, when I went to Vietnam, I got like a super cheap SIM card off the street, and it was just way more data than I get in Australia, and way quicker for a fraction of the price. It was disgusting.
It's because a few people in the chat have mentioned the buffering earlier in the show. They're not complaining anymore, which means if they're not complaining, then there's no problem. A lot of people only arc up or give you feedback if it's bad. But if we were doing the show from Thailand or the Philippines, there'd probably be no buffering problems.
It would be sweet.
It'd basically be like we're in a broadcast quality.
Well, can I tell you, we got the content. Can I tell you, your production value is way better than mine, so they can be thankful for that.
Oh, thank you. Now we have got a question on entropy from Binary Agenda, because there are two genders. We're both males, even though Dougal's... it was commented your hair's a bit more under control now.
It is a bit more. I got a haircut recently. Thanks for noticing.
Well, there's other people in the chat that noticed as well.
Well, give me a rating. Give me a rating. What do you think about it?
It looks like it's a haircut for school. That, like, I know you're not at high school anymore, but because it's not a shoulder length anymore, so it looks
not
like
quite the hippie. I'm not the Ranga Jesus anymore.
No,
I had to go for something a bit more acceptable.
Yeah, so maybe you needed a bit more sort of styling.
Well, I think it did. I was getting knots in it, so I had to let it go. I just can't deal with it.
So Binary Agenda, getting back to the question, what on earth is going on in the National Party? Can you explain the Lou O'Brien thing is about? Yes, so Lou O'Brien, he's quit the National Party room, but not the coalition. He's still a Queensland Liberal National Party member, but he's not in the National Party room. And this is obviously, he was the one that moved the spill motion last week against leader Michael McCormack when they were going to elect a new deputy. Barnaby Joyce wanted his old job back, but Michael McCormack retained the leadership. We don't know how much by, because they don't reveal the votes tally. And David Littleproud, who was the water resources and emergency management minister, is the new deputy. He's based in rural Queensland, but Barnaby Joyce, Matt Canavan, Bridget McKenzie, all on the back bench. They've made it clear that they're suing there, and they're going to make their voices heard.
Well, can I add one thing? I'm not really conservative, but I've seen Johnny Ruddick has been posting that who's like kind of a mainstream conservative political commentator, I'd say, is that the National Party in Australia is the biggest hindrance to good conservative
Yeah, I saw that
governance.
tweet as well. He wants them to
And
merge.
and that he has this idea that if you had the Liberal Party in Australia to be like a big tent similar to the Republican Party in America, under which the Nationals were included, but were not a separate party, you would ensure a much stronger, consistent, and long-lasting Liberal Party government and conservative government.
Well, I think a merging, well, the state Liberal and National Party in New South Wales, I mean, they're basically both centre left. The state New South Wales Nationals. So I don't think that John would get the desired outcome there. It's
Right.
sort of more needed at the federal level, because at obviously the parties have merged in Queensland, the Liberal National Party of Queensland, but the problem there is Queensland is basically two states, with the Central and North Queensland, the LNP members up there sitting in the National Party room, and obviously the needs of the people up there are a lot different to those in the southeast, and they want to win seats in the southeast, the Liberal National Party, but if they neglect the regions, that's when Qatar and One Nation will get votes there, which is why I think basically the state should be cut in two. Have the southeast Queensland, that can be New Queensland, and then have North and Central Queensland I think it should be called Kingsland.
Why don't you float that idea, make a poll, see what the people think.
I could do it in Entropy now, but we haven't got too many people there, so I'll do it in another forum there. But yes, there is this. Well, it's more just because a lot of the blue ribbon seats, the Kooyong, Higgins in Melbourne, Wentworth, Warringah, they're all populated by, as the stereotype is, the doctors' wives who care about the environment and climate change. And so the members in those seats was like Katie Allen and Higgins and Dave Sharma and Wentworth. They want stronger action on climate change so they can retain their seats, and so the Liberal Party can as well. But Labor's also struggling with this as well, to keep their inner city seats and still win the working class regional seats.
Sure. I mean, if you had a look at where people were voting yes and no for the gay marriage debate, I mean, Western Sydney, which were traditionally like safe Labor seats, a lot of them were voting, they were where the no votes were coming from. And so Labor had that friction between socially progressive policy and the kind of, would you say, working class votes in Western Sydney.
And Joel Fitzgibbon, he's the member for Hunter. He's basically become the biggest coal advocate, I'd say, in the Parliament, because he nearly lost his seat to One Nation at the just past federal election. And of course it's motivated by self-interest, but the self-interest is getting re-elected, and who elects you? The voters.
Yeah, exactly.
There's also been a lot of discussion over the past 6 months about how it seems to be the bureaucracy that's running things more than the government, and it was highlighted with the Murray-Darling Basin Authority, which, well, the politicians, they could take an axe to it, but they don't. But they don't really have much of a say in, much influence in how it conducts itself. And then it was also demonstrated with the aftermath of CPAC Australia, when the Attorney General's department decided that former Prime Minister Tony Abbott and the organiser of CPAC Australia, Liberty Works director Andrew Cooper, were agents of the American government, and Andrew Cooper got what's a Section 45(2) notice by the Attorney General's department, saying hand over all your documents relating to CPAC, otherwise you'll be arrested in 14 days. They've withdrawn the notice now after, obviously, public outrage, and a lot of people found that quite disturbing. But Christian Porter, the Attorney General, didn't know that this investigation was going on, and he's supposed to be at arm's length from the Foreign Transparency Register scheme. Yet they thought, these bureaucrats, it was a good idea not just to investigate Andrew Cooper, but Tony Abbott as well. I mean, Tony Abbott's been saving Australia the past 6 months fighting the bushfires.
Yeah, can I tell you, it's crazy the way sometimes the bureaucracies apply their attention selectively. I mean, we made a video not too long ago, my brother and I, going to the Sydney Socialism Conference, and there was a lecture there on how do you combat the rise of the alt-right, and they started handing out Antifa sign-up forms to get your mask on and start beating up people. But I can tell you there was no auditors there. There was no section 15s or 14s or whatever it was to those organisers. And there are conferences like that all over the country in every major city, but they're fine for some reason. And I'm a support. They should be able to have those conferences. But to criticise CPAC, I mean, CPAC's like the most mainstream conservative thing there is. Like, how can you say that that's a foreign government influence?
It's organised over in the US by the American Conservative Union, which is it's not a government body. I mean, obviously it has the word American in their title, but obviously this law was passed, these foreign interference laws, they obviously had China in mind, but as is always the case with legislation which is rushed and poorly drafted, it can have unintended consequences. And of course, well, look what the bureaucracy did. And you can imagine what a Home Affairs Minister, Christina Keneally, and as it was revealed in the Australian last week, it was Mark Dreyfus who suggested to the Attorney General's department, hey, maybe have a look at this. Can you imagine what the bureaucracy would be like, and how they'd administer laws under Home Affairs Minister Christina Keneally and Attorney General Mark Dreyfus?
Yeah, well, I mean, Christina Keneally got a bit of time in the spotlight before CPAC, and I think particularly criticising Raheem Kassam for being like a white supremacist. I think maybe Islamophobic, but he's brown. Like, what do you mean, Christina? You're like.
He said mean things about Nicola Sturgeon. That seems to be the gist of it. Some bad taste jokes, which they were bad taste, but you'd be banned from a country for making a bad taste joke or mean tweet. I don't think so.
No, for sure. It has. You shouldn't get banned. You shouldn't get. Why? I mean, you'd be the one who's more familiar about this than me, because you keep getting zucked. But there's a prevailing idea that you're responsible for what other people say, and it's just it's not true. I mean, it's just not true at all.
Yeah, the 6 degrees link that you're associated with this person, who's associated with this person. So therefore, or if you interview somebody, or you agree with every single one of their beliefs, that it's not, or it's also you're giving them a platform as well by interviewing them. It's a de facto endorsement.
But I mean, the people I would love to talk to the most, probably the worst people. Like, I would love to do an interview with like Kim Jong-un, or with some of the Ayatollahs, or with whoever else. They would be the best people to interview, and also the most useful. Everyone would actually get something out of that, because we have to understand the positions that both people are in before you can kind of start bridging the gap. And there's an idea that includes politicians, it includes Silicon Valley moderators, it includes journalists, that there is a framework within which acceptable dialogue takes place. And to go outside that, not only are you deplatformed, but you're also like a terrible person by virtue of the fact that you're outside it. And it's not really helpful. It doesn't solve the problems, as far as I can tell. It seems like sunlight's usually the best disinfectant to bad ideas, and often the space in which those ideas the ideas that are allowed to be discussed, often there's terrible ideas in there, and criticism of them is also not allowed to be discussed. So I don't think anybody really wins.
I've never yielded to this guilt by association thing. Like a lot of critics of mine have said, oh, one of the people you're associated with said this. Yeah, they did say that. That's their problem. I didn't say that. I'm not responsible for their actions. What they said is their problem. Ask them about that. Of course, they just don't like what I do, and so they think that that's a good smear, or it'll make me somewhat succumb to them. But I've never bitten. But there are, as the term goes, plenty of conservatives who disavow, say the left. I'm sorry that we did this. And CPAC over in the United States is happening at the end of the month. It's happening at. Have you heard of which venue it's happening at? The Gaylord National Convention Center.
Is it really called that?
Yeah, it's called the Gaylord Convention Center.
Is it a joke or is it?
No, that's the legit address on the cpac.org website.
Really? That's hilarious.
But the Proud Boys are banned from attending, and so is anyone associated with the Nick Fuentes' Groyper Army, and Laura Loomer. I'm not sure if you've heard of her. She had her press pass revoked by CPAC because in one of the press briefings she had to go at one of the CNN correspondents for something he said about her previously, and so that got her kicked out. And so Nick Fuentes, at the end of last year, when Turning Point USA had their Student Action Summit, he held his own Groyper Leadership Summit, and now they're going to be having, just before CPAC, AFPAC, America First Political Action Conference, where the keynote speaker is Michelle Malkin, who's a famous anti-immigrant conservative writer. She was fired from the Young Americas Foundation speaking circuit because she refused to disavow Nick Fuentes, and her response was, well, I've never avowed him, so why do I need to disavow him? So she's sort of been the main sort of, I guess, recruit to the Groyper America First movement, or a defector from Conservative Inc. What do you make of that sort of CPAC and Turning Point USA, Young Americas Foundation, they ban all these extremists, but they still let in all the fake news organizations, and in some cases they've even allowed communists into their events.
Yeah, I don't like it, man. I have seen in the past CPAC doesn't let a range of people in. I would much rather let everybody in. And if you want to have a discussion or you want to have a talk, as long as it happens in a civilized way, in such that there's no shouting, you listen to other people's opinions, there's no violence, I think it should really be all above board. And there is just a different level of scrutiny which gets applied to, let's say, people on the far right to the people on the far left, and that's kind of the way it is. I mean, that's all I could. That's
but
all
you
I can
should.
really say.
We shouldn't accept that's the way it is and perpetuate it.
Sure. I think you're right. I think you're right.
Because they're always going to call you a Nazi, fascist, racist, whatever other word they can, no matter what. No, even if you disavow Nick Fuentes or any other person.
Yeah. Look, I think you're true. I think what you say is exactly right. And I think the solution to so many problems with social dialogue is, having more speech rather than less. And one of the issues is that some elements of kind of what you might call the far right I've seen want to put speech laws on, but hardly any. Like, compared the far left who want to put hate speech laws in to control speech. You just don't see that. You don't see that from the right, and so it's a very hard battle to win, because they want to put speech laws on you, but almost like your principles are against speech laws, so you don't want to put speech laws on them. You're happy for them to criticize you, but they're not happy for you to criticize them, and it's a very hard battle to win because it's just a clash of principles. But it's and I don't know the solution, but I would be very hesitant to put any kind of speech laws or codes on.
We might finish up with a pop culture update. The Oscar winners were announced at, what was that, the 92nd Academy Awards, and of course there's this hashtag every year, Oscars so white, because not enough people of color are nominated and win. But they gave Best Picture and Best Director to a Korean movie, Parasite, but it was good to see that Joaquin Phoenix, who played the Joker, Arthur Fleck, did you get around to seeing it?
I've always been told people I was about to watch it, and I never actually got around to it. I heard it was good.
Well, it's out on DVD, iTunes, rental, however you want to. So you can view it now. But you'll remember at the time, but all the social justice feminists were asking us not to watch it because it sympathizes with toxic male mass
school shooters and stuff, right? Yeah,
humanizes them or explains how society shaped them in that way.
Well, it's not surprising coming from the people who believe that you have no individual choice in your own life, and that all the things you do are a culmination of your upbringing, and because all of that is malleable, you know, it would be hard for them to acknowledge the individual choice that happens when somebody perpetrates the act. Because, of course, when you go into other areas of life, like your occupation, where there might be gender differences, you obviously didn't choose that yourself. But I didn't get around to seeing it. I would like to see it, but I heard it was good.
I saw that Blair Cottrell on Telegram, when he saw the Joker, he said, why did the left not like that? Because it's about a working class revolution where the protagonist, he kills the rich and has an imaginary black girlfriend. Except the thing is, when the left see that movie, they discover that, oh, we're actually the rich aristocratic people, because spoiler alert, it's a spontaneous working class revolution. It's not how the modern left are trying to do it with their socialist alternative recruitment. They actually despise the actual working class, the modern left, and they come from obviously rich families, a lot of them.
Well, when I went to the Julian Assange rally, I wish I could remember the name of the socialist group which ran it, but it hated the social justice left. It was totally pro working class, and they had this strange angle where it was like the only people that can free Julian Assange is the united working class, because we're the people who has all the power. But they were saying, and they were emphasizing the real divisions in society are between class and not between gender or race or whoever. So you do still get elements of that, but they're just not nearly as popular or as loud as the progressive left.
And that is actually proper historical Marxism. It's based on class conflict. And I nearly forgot, he's your man, Julian Assange. Tulsi Gabbard's your girl, but Julian Assange is your man. He's got his extradition hearing on February 24th, and he's being kept in horrendous, basically psychological, torturous conditions, isolated from all the other prisoners, and in his court appearances, it's almost like he's forgotten who he is.
Yeah, it's so sad, man. It's so sad. He's facing, I think, 17 charges, or under I want to say 1917 Espionage Act, looking at 175 years in prison if he's convicted. He's already 50. Can't imagine he's going to live to 200. So the extradition, people always said, it wasn't about the extradition. It was about the rape charges, which were consequently dropped, or as he didn't turn up for his bail. And everyone knows it's about, he pissed off the wrong people, right? He pissed off the highest people in society by publishing facts, what they were doing. And what we're finding out now is that prosecutors are now targeting journalists through the interactions they have with the sources. So they're going to try and pin Julian Assange for aiding Chelsea Manning getting into the system allegedly, and then sharing the data with him. Then they'll prosecute him under like anti-hacking laws.
Yeah, because Chelsea Manning is now back in prison as well.
All right, I didn't know that.
Well, that's the last time I heard, for refusing to cooperate with the Assange investigation.
Right. Well, good on her. And I have there's the sneaky hope in my belly, in my heart, is that Trump will give him a pardon, but you can't bet on that. And that, or at least Scott Morrison does something about it, because he's an Australian citizen who is being held unjustly.
And how can he be charged under the US Espionage Act when he's not a US citizen? Never has been.
I mean, it's a bit shameful what the Australian government is doing. I mean, it makes you a bit sad, because you just have this guy who's just rotting, with no sunlight for like 7 years for publishing facts, and like the collateral murder video, which was just people open firing on civilians and reporters in that Apache helicopter. None of those 12 people ever got prosecuted, but the guy who published it is getting prosecuted.
Well, Trump, he hasn't indicated at all that he'll pardon his lifelong friend and confidant, Roger Stone, who he got convicted by a jury over charges stemming from, or basically entrapment from the Mueller investigation. And he hasn't, I know that the Proud Boys are hoping that he'll pardon the New York Two, who got sentenced to 4 years in prison for acting in self-defense when they were ambushed by Antifa. I mean, Trump's got the pardon power, but hasn't used it yet. I mean, he has used it on a few, but none who've had basically been politically targeted.
Yeah, we have to wait and see. Hope, but yeah, it's only we'll have to wait and see.
Well, thank you so much, Dougal, for coming on tonight, and we had a pretty long yarn. We'll chop this up into different segments. I noticed that you do that with a lot of your chats on your channel, so I'll do the same with this, because we covered a lot. And yeah, everyone please check out the Carnage House Productions YouTube channel, and yeah, we'll definitely keep in touch, the pair of us.
For sure. Thanks for having me on. I had a good time.
All right, talk soon. All right, and that's the show for this Monday night. Thank you everyone for watching on all three streams. XYZ Live is up next on the Maddie Rose Live YouTube channel with their editor David Hiscock, and of course Maddie Rosenberg of Maddie's Modern Life. WilmsFront will be back on Wednesday night, 7 p.m. live on the Tim Wilms channels. My guest will be Pastor Denny Nialia, who founded the Catch the Fire Ministries. He was the first high-profile target of Victoria's Racial and Religious Tolerance Act 2001, way back in the early 2000s, for literature and speeches that his ministries published about Islam. He's a Sri Lankan immigrant, and he's seen firsthand the effects of radical Islam in his country of origin. He'll be joining me live here in the studio. We'll also obviously talk about his time with the founding and as the president of the Rise Up Australia Party and movement, and some of his other views which have got him into trouble. Of course, I'll be back tomorrow night for Trans Tasman Talk, which will be 7 p.m. Melbourne time on the main Unshackled channel with editor of Right Minds NZ, Dewey de Boer. And of course, later in the week, there's Uncockables, of course, 8:30 p.m. Melbourne time on the Uncockables channel. And now, as you know, I'm not on Facebook anymore, but if you go to timwilms.com, you can find a link to my Gab, Telegram and Minds account, and I've also reactivated my MeWe account. I'll put the links up to that in the next day or so, because I've still got a few things to sort out and reactivate that. And of course, it's got linked to the podcast version of the show. And of course, if you want to support WilmsFront and other Unshackled productions, please take out a Unshackled membership at theunshackled.net/membership. You can also donate at theunshackled.net/donate. We're on subscribestar.com/theunshackled. And we also have our store at theunshackled.net/store. As I mentioned during the show, I'm uploading the archive of WilmsFront episodes to rationalrise.tv, which is James Fox Higgins, the director of that. That's a self-hosted video platform where, in case we're ever nuked by the mainstream social media networks, you can still access WilmsFront episodes. And I'm also backing up these episodes on BitChute. So thank you so much, everyone, for your company tonight. I shall see you tomorrow night, and I'll be off to watch XYZ live.
Thanks for tuning in to WilmsFront. Visit timwilms.com or Rational Rise TV to view the archive of episodes. And keep visiting theunshackled.net to view all our shows and to keep up with the latest real news and analysis.